Alright guys, so I got about another hour tonight to mess with this engine, and if, I don't know if this will be in a new video, but if it is, it's the 2.0 liter Ford Focus engine, the single overhead cam engine. Little backstory on it: it dropped a valve seat, grenaded the engine, and so I'm rebuilding it. So what I'm going to be doing in this video is I'm going to be pulling the cam out, and I'm going to be inspecting the cam lobes, or the journals. I'm going to be inspecting the journals, and I'm going to be measuring the cam lobes to check for the correct height, to see if any of them are deformed or too wore out to go back in the new head. But before I pull this cam out and we take a look at that, quick update on the rocker arms and the lifters and the guides that I took out last night. After I stopped filming last night, I let the first rocker soak for like 45 minutes in Purple Power, and even with the nylon brush, the heavy duty nylon brush, that varnish it's not really sludgy. It's not you can't pick it up out of there, you know, but it's a very hard varnish that was stuck on everything, and it was extremely hard to get off. I couldn't even scrape it off with my my fingernails. So 45 minutes soaking in the Purple Power and with scrubbing, and it still wasn't coming off. And that was just the first rocker and guides for I think I started with the first cylinder. But anyway, so I soaked them overnight, and sure enough, you know, I gave it about 9 or 10 hours, and it actually ate the varnish off, which was pretty impressive, because that stuff was really on there. I'm not sure of a parts washer that could get that off. Certainly not within a couple cycles in a parts washer. Even the heavy duty steam ones. I mean, that stuff is really stuck on there. So the only way to get that off is just going to be to soak it in something, a solvent of some sort, or degreaser. But if you remember the last video, I had them in individual baggies because I was trying to keep them in the correct order, so I can put them back on the new head in the order they were on the old head. Well, cleaning them one at a time was not going to work, because that just took way too long. So I took them out of the baggies and I actually went with something like this. So this is the rocker and probably the guides in here for the third cylinder on the exhaust side, and that's full of Purple Power, and they've been soaking for a few hours. So they're not ready to come out of there yet. But just to give you an idea of how that cleaned them up, I mean, that just looks like just burnt. I mean, it's just like charcoal. And that's what the rockers look like. So this is what they look like now. And they got a light coat of wool. But if you can tell, there's no varnish. These look like new. The fulcrums under the seat of the fulcrum is it's very clean. I mean, it did a really good job. Here's some of the lifter guides. I mean, they are really nice. And all I did was put a light coat of wool on them until I can get to the point where I can install them. But anyway, that's what I'm going to do. Now the lifters themselves, I was a little hesitant to soak those in the Purple Power, but they were just as dirty. So I did soak them as well, but what I've been doing when I pull them out is I try to dry them out as best as I can with some compressed air and some carb cleaner, and then I let them soak in a cup of just motor oil. So I let them soak in there for a few minutes to try to get any of the carb cleaner out, and it seems to be working pretty well. They're not perfectly clean, but they're a lot better than they were, and they spin pretty freely on the bottom. So I hope that works. But anyway, that's now that that's out of the way, let's pull this cam out. So the first thing I want to do to get this cam gear off is I'm going to stick this is just a T-handle screwdriver. I'm going to stick this up into the gear so it'll lock in place. And then I'm going to take a 15mm socket on the impact driver, and I'm going to buzz that off. It's very hard to get that off otherwise, so I'll give that a shot. Okay, again, this little impact driver is awesome. If I'm not mistaken, the torque specs for this going on is 77 foot-pounds, and I believe they call for some thread locker on there. So I had to chew on them for just a second, but it broke them free. So yeah, if you have one of these, it'll make your life a little easier. After you've broken the bolt free on the front, if you have a puller, you can use a puller, or you can take a big flat blade screwdriver and sit it on the neck of the gear here, or the sprocket. I keep calling this a gear, it's actually a sprocket. You put it there and you can just beat it out with a hammer. So that's how I just broke that free. Okay, once the sprocket's off, there's this little catch here. I believe it's called the camshaft thrust plate. I'm going to use an 8mm socket to break those free. There's the camshaft thrust plate. So remember that was in this way, right here. And we'll clean all these parts up. So at this point, I don't think there's anything keeping us in besides maybe this oil seal. And so I'm going to see the best way I can pry that oil seal out of there. And I may be able to do it with a pick from the inside. All I did to get this seal out was I took a little jeweler screwdriver and I just gently went around and pried the sides of this seal. So I think that's everything that should be holding the cam in. So we're going to gently turn this as needed and pull this sucker out. There we have it. The cam is out. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be inspecting the cam lobes to check for the lobe lift. I'm going to check the journals to make sure they're not worn out. And as far as this head goes, I think this head is done. I think we've pulled everything off here we need to pull off of it. Everything we have pulled off is going on to the new head. The old valves and springs go back to heads only. I called heads only. I was going to do the courtesy of cleaning the head up for them. They said don't even worry about it. So it's going to go back like it is. And I'm going to start installing parts on the head next. So I may show you a quick video on what the manual calls for as far as checking the for lobe lift. I may show a quick video on that. One thing I forgot to mention, and I think I left it out of my first video, is before you send the head back, if you're doing the same thing that I'm doing, make sure that you take your your guides. So there's two little dowel rod guides that guide the head onto the block. I believe they go into this hole and this hole here, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think that's what the tooth that was in. Yeah, make sure you got those out of your head, because you're going to need those to put your new head on. So actually, I had my two in here earlier today, and I had forgot they were under here. So I went ahead and put them back in the block just so I wouldn't forget them. So make sure you take those out. Alright guys, I spent some time cleaning this up because it was in pretty bad shape. It had a lot of varnish on it as well. I used Purple Power on this as well, and some elbow grease, basically a lot of scrubbing. And since I've pretty much cleaned all of the oil and varnish that was on it off, I'm going to go ahead and put this in tonight, I think. Simply because I just don't want any surface rust developing on this. So before I do that, I'll show you how to check the lobe lift on these lobes. You subtract the height from the width, and the standard lobe lift is 0.245 inches. That's subtracting the height from the width. The allowable lift loss is 0.005 of an inch. So if you're within 0.005 of an inch of that spec, less than that spec, then you're still within spec. So I checked these, and some of these were pretty close, but most of them were right there at the spot on. And that's with quite a few miles on this car. So you probably won't have any problems. Height of the lobe minus the width of the lobe, and it needs to be within 0.005 of an inch of the spec, which is 0.245 inches. So there's that. So I've already checked all those. They're all fine. There's not a lot of wear on them. So I'm actually going to go ahead and lube up the cam. I'm using assembly lube. This is the Permatex kind. There's several different kinds. I'm going to coat this pretty well, and then I'm going to go ahead and put it in. My rockers and lifters and the guides, all that is still being cleaned. It's I checked them earlier, and they're all pretty much clean. I just need to clean them off and oil them. So I'm probably not going to get to that. But I am going to install the cam, and I'm going to go ahead and put in the seal here, if I can find it in my rebuild kit. I guess I can go ahead and put the sprocket back on, and the guide, whatever they called that piece. I mentioned it earlier. Okay, let's get started on that. Alright guys, as you can see, I was pretty, I wasn't shy about putting the assembly lube on the cam. I coated it pretty well. You can also drop it down through the, the lifter holes here. You can drop it down there, but I really wanted to get it on the journals really well. Alright. So we're almost there. Alright. So there we have it. The new cam is in, the new head. Nice. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lube up. This is the one that goes in. I'm going to put some lube on that. I'm going to tap that in lightly with something because it's kind of a tight fit. And then I'm going to see about putting the sprocket back on. Alright, this is as far as I'm going to get tonight. Cam's in. It's all lubed up with assembly lube. The seal's in. It's got a new seal in here. I went ahead and cleaned up these parts where I would already had this together, but I went ahead and cleaned up all this. Put a very, very light coat of oil on the inside of this. Cleaned up all the bolts. Cleaned up this piece. This is the little piece that goes right in there. And clean up the bolts that go with it as well. This is pretty easy to get on there. It only goes one way. There's a notch there at the top, and it slides right on there. just like that. And I think it's torqued to, I think it's like 77 pounds or so. Tomorrow I'll go ahead and put that on. And hopefully I can get my my rocker arms, my lifters, the guides and all that cleaned up and lightly oiled. And I can go ahead and get those installed as well tomorrow. And we'll be ready to move on to something else soon, I hope. Thanks for watching.